of the church. If it had not been for the word that I heard, I'd be lost forever. But God saved me right there in the church.
Hi, I'm Dana.
This is Liston.
And welcome to
Only for the Church.
Man, listen. Last time we were talking, they had cameras in the room. We didn't know we were going off. But we talked ourselves into having to do this session.
Yeah, because you were not being genuine. You were being very disingenuous about money, and I was offended because you are not a prosperity preacher, but you are a prosperity preacher, and I'm a lowly holiness preacher trying to make ends meet.
That don't read the book of Revelation. Because the book of Revelation says, and all liars will have their place in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone.
But see, the problem is we are made to look like charlatans and money-hungry prognosticators that take scripture and eisegete it and not exegete it, and we don't live what the Bible would call, out of context, modest lifestyles.
Well, so let's talk about preachers and money. Let's talk about preachers and money. So, the first thing is we know that God doesn't call us to preach and without an expectation of Him taking care and meeting our needs supernaturally through our natural acts. Now, when we think about the call of God, first person I call a preacher was Adam. And when God called him to preach, to preach the knowledge of good and evil that came from God, first place God put him was in
a fruitful
Eden.
Place.
He put him in a fruitful
place where he had all of the provisions that he could need or could desire.
And his only job was to preach,
take
to
care of that
tend
garden.
and to keep that garden. Don't let nothing in, just to promote the will of God to any and anyone. And he didn't start having money problems till he stopped.
Well, that wasn't that woman.
Listen.
Now that is an orthodox biblical interpretation I just gave you.
What?
That is more androcentric than it is egalitarian. But I still believe two things will mess up a preacher: money and women.
The wrong woman.
Money and women.
The wrong woman. Because two things.
Man, you try to be diplomatically correct.
Because I'm saying if you get the right woman.
They stop. Come on.
Like a Rachel.
Rochelle?
My wife is named Rachel. Rachel, not Ro. So, listen, because of her support and what she does, it helps me to do better. Now, if you get with the wrong woman, it can hurt you.
No, I agree. I agree with all of that. But we're talking about
Adam and Eve.
And that's the biblical narrative that Dr. Dana Carson, the apostle, brought up.
But I brought up the aspect of prosperity.
You did. And then
preaching.
And I interjected that he may have been able to manage his money.
Well, that sounds real sexist.
Well, I'm not a chauvinist, but I mean.
Someone could argue eventually something was going to go wrong because God said Adam was alone and that was not good.
Well, you and I both know. Come on, stop.
We're better together.
Stop it. You and I both know when God created Adam in the imago Dei, the image of God, Adam was not alone. We know that because God was there.
But
He
God
was not
was
complete.
a spirit.
Okay, yeah.
And so he lived on
understand.
another sphere.
Another sphere, and
so-
it needed to be fulfilled in the realm
But
that
even
he was
God
created.
said, while God was present, it's not good for man to be alone.
But he did not mean in the aspect that Adam was lonely and needed that level of companionship.
Well, he did mean that he was
no, he
lonely.
didn't. No, he didn't.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
I do not believe
He needed
Adam
companionship. He
was-
needed fellowship.
Dana, stop, man.
I'm saying,
Dana,
why
come
you
on,
want,
man.
Why
You know what?
Why you want a woman today?
You know what? I don't want to do this.
Why you want? Because you said you're a holiness preacher.
Let's get to
you're
the question.
a lonely holiness preacher.
You're not being
Why you want?
honest.
Why you?
Because these
wouldn't
cameras
mind
running, you don't
having-
be honest. That ain't
why
right.
wouldn't you mind not having a? You got God.
I got God, and I'm not complete without a woman. So help me.
So you were lonely.
No, I
So
was
you-
not lonely. I was not complete.
Complete, half, not whole, lonely, semantics.
No, it's truth.
It's semantics. So look, so let's get on with this thing though. So we know Adam.
Okay.
Adam didn't have money problems to after he disobeyed God, but when he obeyed God, when he obeyed God, he was in the garden. His provisions were met.
Okay.
After he fell, God said, "By the sweat of your brow shall you eat." So he lost his provision when he lost his perspective.
His focus.
His focus, his perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but the point here is God takes care of his representative. God takes care of his preacher.
Let's see, bidet. God does. I agree with that. You could not have said that more eloquently. But does his representative need all of the extra bells and whistles that will cause the representative to appear to be a charlatan?
Okay, so I don't know about what the limit is, what the limitation is, how much God said you can and cannot have. But I do know. So you know me, I'm a Bible thinking guy. So when I look at it, and I'm a systematic theologian. So I look at things systematically. Whatever the topic we're talking about, I like to look at it. So I see God first taking care of Adam. Okay, and then I see God taking care of Noah in the ark. I see as long as he does what God tells him, God provides for him. Then I see God taking care of Abraham. Okay, then I see God taking care of
Isaac.
he takes care
Jacob.
of Moses. So
But you got to get.
No, I'm not trying to go all the way. I'm just trying to get to a main place that I believe is germane to this conversation, the priesthood.
Okay, so let's just go back for a moment. If God ultimately wants his representatives to reflect a level of resource, I wouldn't even call it wealth. Let's say resource, provision, better word. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you say outside of Genesis, where you started with Adam and Eve and moved through Noah and then Abraham and then the 12 tribes of Israel, let's take them down into Egypt then when they're in slavery.
Okay,
right?
so
Moses
was
called to take them from a place of bondage, lack, into a land that what?
Promise.
Milk, honey, agricultural fertileness, you would say. Provision. Resources. So you're saying that anyone that represents God then must be a person that projects resources.
I'm not saying they have to project it. I'm saying it's the promise of God that if you do his will, he will take care of you.
I got that, but I'm saying I agree with that. But how you and I see it projected may differ. Because I believe we are supposed to have provisions. We are supposed to have resources. But I don't think all of them need to be on our back. Yeah. Where people can see the resource and the provision, where they can take pot shots at us. That's what I believe.
Now, I believe that is the person's choice.
Okay.
They're free choice. If it's your wealth, how you wear it, that's your business. But you do need to know if you choose to wear it in diamonds on your back, then you're going to get more critics and criticism. But it doesn't mean that something is crooked about your wealth. Whether you want to hide your wealth in a bank or you want to wear it on your front porch, it's your decision. If is the wealth legitimate? That's the question. Mm-hmm. Is the resource legitimate? Now, if it's illegitimate, it doesn't matter if you publicly or privately hide it or display it. It's illegitimate.
But let's assume, let's use the word, let's say it's alleged. That
you don't like the word alleged.
I don't like it. I can't stand it. Let's say alleged.
Okay.
I've gotten my provisions, my resources through a proper vehicle. Mm-hmm. I have free moral agency to express to the world my resource and provision that I received through a legitimate vehicle. Mm-hmm. Is that wisdom to do that? And if we're supposed to be men and women of wisdom and discernment in the climate and the environment that we live, would it be wise to just make that type of decision to show people a legitimate resource and provision?
Wise or ethical are two different things.
Okay,
right or wrong.
Okay.
Wise or ethical. Now, it may not be wise,
but it's ethical.
But it can be ethical. Like, so it may not be wise for me to show you what I have because that may make you feel a certain way about me. However, the way I got it, that's what we said, was through legitimate channels.
Okay.
So it's nothing dishonest about it. Now the question is do I have the freedom to just let any and everybody see it without it being looked at like this is unethical? I got it through legitimate channels, so it's not unethical. It may be unwise for you in an environment, but then what context? I mean, how far do we go that?
Okay.
So,
okay.
I know Paul says if eating meat offends your brother, then don't eat meat in front of him.
No problem. Let's go back to systematic theology.
Okay.
That system of thinking. Okay. Older Testament text. Israel's king, Hezekiah, he is sick unto death. Okay. The prophet says to him, "You're going to live." Remember that? You remember that text, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. The Bible says the king of Babylon sent him a letter. I heard you were sick. Hezekiah invites him into his kingdom, and he shows him all of his wealth, all of his provision, and all of his resource. What happened? The prophet came to him and said to him, "That which you do is unwise. Because what's going to happen 100 years from now, they coming back. Get your stuff." That's what
the prophet didn't say that.
Who does that?
Listen.
To my point. Did you get my point though?
Yeah.
No. Because you want me a systematic theologian.
Yeah. But I'm saying we jumping around here.
No, Dana, yeah. Come on.
Yeah. We proof texting.
No, Dave. That's the same narrative.
Okay.
You can't let everybody in to see
your stuff.
Your wealth.
Yeah, I understand. But Solomon showed the Queen of Sheba.
He may have been trying.
Okay, but I'm saying he still showed his stuff.
But I'm saying it blew her mind. She said,
"Because the half has not been told."
My Lord.
But here is the deal, Paige. Come on, man, listen. So here's the deal. God called Moses to preach. He takes care of Moses. We see him supernaturally takes care of him. But then he tells him to establish an official, legitimate episcopacy.
Now here you go. Here you go.
So he says establish the priesthood. And they're to be taken care of. Levi, the name attached, they got to be attached to the Lord.
Okay.
So their provisions
come through the tithe.
Offering, and so they get 10% of everybody's 10%.
Everybody's 10%.
So which meant then they probably had more than the average individual had, because they got 11 other 10%.
But it wasn't for them to look and to live lavishly.
Okay.
It was to take care of temple. It was to take care of the house of God. It was to be administered and distributed properly.
No. You had 3 tithes in the Older Testament.
But
you had 3 tithes.
But they want to wear it on their behind.
One of them was for the priesthood period.
No problem, Dave. But that one out of the 3 wouldn't put them where they drive in Bentley chariots.
See,
come on.
You know, I think that we are mixing messages here, because I'm trying to argue here that God provides for the preacher, and a lot of times we see in Scripture it's not proportional provision. Sometimes he provides more for his preacher than
supernaturally.
And I'm saying, like Elijah, everybody else was in a famine.
And God provided.
God provided for him. So I think that one of the things that I want to establish just first is that God doesn't call the preacher to be without provisions.
I agree. I have no problem with
that. Before we even talk about what he does with his provision, I think the first principle is that
God provides for his preacher.
Because what's argued out there now is that the preacher is a pimp. He pimping the people. He living off the people. Where if he's really sent by God, and the earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof, cattle on 1,000 hill belongs to him. All silver and gold belongs to him. We have to look at this issue of stewardship. All things belong to God. And God distributes to people, and then the people that listen to God
have to manage it properly.
They have to manage it properly, and part of that is managing it in their giving towards religious duty, activities, and service. God prescribes that. Mm-hmm. The tithe was 23 1/3%, not 10%.
10%, correct.
And so, therefore, those funds went there. The priests never ever had any issues of provision. Now, when we look back in antiquity, we know good and well the priests didn't have the options to use resources like we use resources today. They didn't have the kind of money exchange, and they did more bartering, and they didn't have car dealerships and real estate
probably
places.
Didn't have the allurements and the distractions.
Right, that wasn't
that we have today.
So the thing that we have to deal with is not what the priest did with the money. We had to deal with the principle: did God give him wealth? Did God give him provisions? Did he give him more than enough? And why? And how can you preach? How can you preach El Shaddai? How can you preach a God that's more than enough, and you're the preacher and you never experience more than enough? So I believe it's not about what the preacher does with their money. Now that becomes an issue for me of wisdom, but it's not an issue of ethics. Ethically, God can give me more money than he gives a parishioner, and I shouldn't feel bad about God blessing me based on the service that I provide him, his temple, his people. If I make more, have more than one or several of my parishioners. The issue is, am I violating ethics, financial and stewardship ethics, by receiving this compensation? And so that's what I'd like for us just to talk about, the compensation first, and then we talk about the choices of how you utilize your compensation.
Well, I think today when we think about compensation as a traveling itinerant minister who also pastors a local church, who also has other enterprises going on, when you have different streams of income, you have access to things that the world would deem wealthy people have. Mm-hmm. Okay. People in our ministries don't always have the knowledge of the other streams of income that we have going on. They only hear what's going on social media or what's being presented to them in a nefarious way. We don't take the time to have a meeting, neither do I think we should, to say, well, I made $500,000 on this book. I made another $250,000 on this investment. I've got stock. I've got other assets. I'm into real estate. I don't think that is wise to do. Because at the end of the day, if we're going to be very honest, a lot of our wealth came because of the call of God on our life. Mm-hmm. This call gave me opportunities to do other things, to become wealthy. Some preachers can't say that, but we're here today discussing really the issues of those who don't have that and that are rightfully being criticized. And we're the ones who have to explain something that they can't explain because they don't have the other streams of income. So we have to be honest about how we're being viewed, how we're looked at.
Yeah,
and even traveling around the country, our writers, what I desire to receive, compensation when I go out to minister. To be quite frank with you, I think we make a king's ransom for something that we would do for free. Yeah. I would do this for free.
And see, so when it comes to people evaluating and assessing our wealth, especially those that have a negative view of it, like they are the spiritual IRS, mm-hmm. and they are trying to regulate our revenue, they don't know our value. And so I think what I just heard you talk about is value, and we don't determine our own value. So when you talk about value is determined by the person who's going to buy it, purchase it.
Supply and demand.
And so they're going to pay for it what it's worth to them. So you have a house, you say, I'm going to sell my house for $300,000. It's valued at $300,000. Well, it's valued at whatever the highest person will pay. That may be $150,000. So the value of your house is $150,000 is what you can get. So I think the problem is for a lot of people is they miscalculate our value. They don't do a proper valuation of who we are. And every ministry gift has to be valued where it is. Now, I started my church off with 9 people in a house. Well, that church grew and grew and grew and had become the largest church under African American leadership in Austin, Texas. And then God told me to move after I had built a major operations mm-hmm. there. But while I was there, I had a 6 Series Mercedes, and I had a couple of homes. I had one in Austin, had one in Houston, but I had a large congregation, and also my value on the road, people would give me honorariums.
Correct.
But also we had a school, we had a daycare, we had a printing press, we had a law firm.
Your lifestyle was commensurate with what you had accomplished.
We had entrepreneurial ventures. And so my value as a preacher, so if you look and say you drove a 6 Series Mercedes, well, I drove a 6 Series Mercedes before I left there and had to start all over again in Alvin, Texas, from ground again. But my value was this. So I drove and had things that a lot of preachers didn't have, and a lot of people in my congregation didn't have that. But I had a whole bunch of people that were professionals, they were lawyers, doctors, engineers.
And they could appreciate your wealth.
And they could appreciate my wealth. But now, if a person looking on to the ministry from the outside and they had not acquired the class status that my ministry was in, they can look at me and evaluate me out their class and also out of their smaller churches, and what and the pastor, what he could afford and what he could not afford. And then it could look like I lived a lavish lifestyle, an exorbitant lifestyle. But a workman is worthy of his hire.
I understand.
So
Correct.
If I grow a ministry the larger my ministry grows, the larger my salary grows, the larger my revenue stream becomes. And Paul talks about he that plows
should plow in hope.
Should plow in hope.
No man goes to war without at his own expense.
Exactly. So now, if the problem and the challenge is a lot of people, they don't increase their skill sets and in order to increase their value. Case in point, you and I have been friends for almost 30 some years.
Plus.
So when you were a successful evangelist, when I met you, you came when I had the big church in Austin, Texas.
Correct.
So you know we were rocking it. It was Praise Tabernacle then. And you would come to me and we had a conversation. And you were sharp, you were dressing, you were riding well, because you weren't hurting. Your dad helped catapult you into the ministry. You weren't like any other preacher starting off. Your value was higher.
Was already significant.
It was already significant. And you and I talked, and in a conversation we had, I pulled you to the side and I told you that you're a great preacher. And I told you you could become a greater preacher if you knew more about what you was talking about. You remember that? And I told you needed a theological education.
That's right.
I said, you good at what you do, Page, but you would be so much better if you knew what the hell you was talking about. You know, we had that conversation, and I said, now that ain't right. And then I showed you, and what did you do? You didn't just go back, you didn't pout and cry, because we were going to be friends whether you told me to kiss your butt or not. We were going to be friends, but you went back and you got you an MDiv and a doctorate of sacred theology and a D-Min. You went back and got 3 more degrees and became adjunct professor at multiple schools and so forth. Now, did that increase your value in terms of money, resources, opportunity, or not?
I think you need to mind your business of what increased my value.
But see, here's the point, Paige. You invested more into yourself. And when you did that, your resources and your growth, it increased. We can't help it because a Negro don't invest in his ministry and in his skill sets, and he keeps something real small. He won't even invest in mentorship. You won't even let nobody mentor you. And then you want to compare. They want to compare this to that. And then you got preacher haters out there who are coming against preachers, period. And then they're looking and they're saying, look at their lavish lifestyle. Man, I have 8 college degrees and I was a high school dropout. My parents were former sharecroppers, Mississippi sharecroppers. I've worked like the Dickens on my ministry. My ministry, I have one of the largest ministry profiles of African Americans in this country. I don't talk about it much. People don't know me like that. But I'm saying I work hard.
But you're deserving of wealth in that status. I don't think that's the question. The question is, it is viewed by those who don't have exposure to that as something negative, because those who don't have the training, the degrees, the curriculum vitae, they're living off the backs of people's naivete, because the pew doesn't know. We're supposed to be training them on how to discern real from fake. But they don't know how to, so they put all of us in the same boat as being money hungry preachers that live off the backs of people and manipulate them. Yeah. And that's the environment that we live in. Come on, Dave. We talk about this all the time. The prophetic office has become the pathetic office that is designed in the 21st century Pentecostal environment to excite people, call their names, whatever. And we circle back around to money. And that's what people are seeing, and they're exposed, and they're talking about it. And that's why we're here today trying to debunk that foolishness and say, God is a God of provision. God wants us to be blessed. God has no issue with us living lavish lifestyles. But now it goes back to, in my opinion, it does go back to ethics. Because if you're an ethical person, you're going to do things. And I think that word moderation, as you said, it could be a little bit uncomfortable. It's relative. It can be subjective. But I think we should use some level of wisdom, to me, that's connected to the ethic piece.
Well, I don't know if it's ethical. If it's earnestly, if I earned it earnestly
correctly,
then if I want to be a fool in how I distribute my money, that's my choice, and it's nothing unethical. I have no consequence, divine consequence for how I spend it.
That's the key. There's no divine consequence, but there is a natural consequence and repercussion. Yeah. And that's what's killing.
And that's what makes it not wise.
That's right. That's what's hurting the institution. It ain't hurting the real church, but it is killing the institution. And there's a lot of people that won't come into the institution to understand the principles of the church because it looks so nefarious.
And then the issue is that we can't let the naysayers stop us from teaching the truth and living and abiding in the truth, because a lot of these people that constantly keep up this controversy over money in the church, many of them don't go to church. Many of them, when they went to church, they never tithed, they never gave
offering. Never.
And so they develop a defense and an offense against preachers, church, and money. And they try to justify themselves not doing it by talking about what's happening with the money when people give it. Now, and I'm sure so with me, you know that I did a Duke MBA, Global MBA. I did a Master's in Economic Development and Entrepreneurship. And I've done all kind of certifications concerning wealth building,
business,
technology, business for a dual purpose. One, to lead my church in the 21st century, which I believe churches that are going to exist and sustain in the 21st century must be entrepreneurial. So I needed to know enough about business I had an undergrad in business as well. About business, to be able to lead my church in a healthy manner, entrepreneurially in business. And as a result, we have a lot of businesses right now
Correct.
in our church. But now, then it is my responsibility to try to help educate my congregation on wealth building. But if I'm an ignorant preacher when it comes to how to build wealth, but I understand the Bible in terms of how to receive wealth, then I'm not being as fair and supportive to my congregation as I could be. It doesn't mean that I have to be a financial guru in order to be a pastor, but I do have to make sure that I bring people in to empower my people, not just prophets and others,
right.
just
Teach
to
them.
take offerings.
Instruct them.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. And so we can help them learn how to build wealth. Because me as a pastor, I'm not, first of all, if I want to drive a Bentley, I'm going to drive a Bentley. But I only can drive a Bentley if I can afford a Bentley. Now, and I only can afford a Bentley if my revenue doesn't kill my business or my ministry. I have enough surplus to afford a business.
But Dana, come on, you and I know we have a litany of individuals that drive these lavish vehicles, don't even own their own buildings, having services in hotels, rented facilities. You own land. I own my building. You own your building. That type of teaching is very rare today. You and I are anomalies. We understand an asset from a liability. We understand it's important for my people to understand financial responsibility, to be fiduciary healthy, so they can help me do what God has called me to do. They have the provision. I have the vision. They have the provision. I got to show them how to invest the provision into the house of God and also save so they can be blessed, so they can reflect what I'm teaching them. And I don't think we see that happening. And if we did, we would have more people on a platform like this saying what you have said, you have done to prepare your congregation to be healthy as it relates to money, entrepreneurship, streams of income, saving, capital. Your church can't have more going out than it has coming in.
Now,
and it's a healthy church.
So now let me argue the other side here. Being a student of history, understanding 1865 and Reconstruction and before, understanding the Black experience, understanding chattel slavery. I think, in all fairness to some of the leaders who were able to build ministries and build their wealth, I like to believe that many of them didn't have impure motives. They were earning wealth the best way they knew how, even though we would call it void of integrity, and we may even call it unethical, because they were prospering while their institutions were struggling. And I think that it's an education thing. I think that it's a symptom and a disease of slavery and post-slavery mentality. And I think that a lot of the preachers probably were entrepreneurial, but there were not a lot of business opportunities. And so preaching became the way that they earned their monies, and they didn't have the abilities theologically. They didn't have the finances, nor was it made available for them to study. We were black preachers were more inspirational. Yes, we have the Dr. Kings and so forth, but those were rare situations. So I think that I wouldn't want to come down as much, because I think I've met a lot of pastors. If you would have looked at them, they look like charlatans. I would think they were charlatans. But you sit down and you talk to them, and you realize that they really thought that was their way to become prosperous, and they didn't think deep enough about their congregations. They didn't think about empowering people to gain wealth, because they really were very surprised. They were very surprised themselves on how they got wealth, and they got carried away.
But I don't think that we could characterize those in mainstream denominations that way. Because when you think about mainstream African-American denominations, you think about the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Mm-hmm. You think about the Baptist. You think about they had
God in Christ. PAW.
Well, when I look at them, I look at them more as mainstream. No, I see them as Pentecostals. Okay. Pentecostalism is a lot different from mainstream denominations. Okay. And the criteria and the protocols as it relates to matriculation was much different. Okay. In the AME church, you had to have a certain standard of education in order even to be ordained and then become a pastor.
But not so in the Baptist,
maybe not in the Baptist as much, but King was a Baptist. Yeah,
it wasn't a requirement.
It may not have been, but as years went on, it became more in vogue to go to school in those mainstream denominations versus Pentecostalism. Yeah. See, I was raised in the soil of Pentecostalism. Yeah. So my father was not always Pentecostal. My dad was an AME preacher. So he came up in the AME church understanding the value of training. So his mentality was not the same as the Pentecostal who were just reared right out of the soil of it. So I grew up hearing in the Pentecostal church, don't go to the cemetery. Don't go to the school. Don't you open up your mouth and God's gonna fill it. Well, that's not true. So we were highly energized spiritually, calling that the anointing. Mm-hmm. So we had a burden to preach, but not a burden to study. And that's out of balance. Yeah. So because you didn't have a burden to study and God is blessing you because you are doing things right, I think that we had a greater responsibility to go and be trained or mentored or sit under someone that knew more than us to show us how to properly structure our ministries. My dad's advantage was he worked for a Jewish man that showed him how to buy brown stones in Manhattan. He sat him down and showed my dad the power of wealth, trained him and taught him. That's not common for the average preacher in my dad's era. My dad's 86 years old. So growing up in that era, if you were Pentecostal, you relied on the Spirit, lead you and guide you. And you fell into some bad financial habits that did become ethical. It did become unethical. It did become wrong. And as time went on, that same behavior start to be perpetuating in the generations that would follow them. So now we have a generation of preachers who are being trained, who are being taught, who are sitting under mentors, going to seminary and finding out, you know what, it's nothing wrong with the wealth. It's how we manage it. It's how we distribute it.
You know, you bring up something that I think is very key. You talked about Pentecostalism. Now, I grew up Baptist, and so when you look at the church, and then I became Spirit-filled when I got saved. A year after I was saved, I was baptized in the Holy Ghost. So my real Christian life or kingdom life was Pentecostal.
Yeah, but you were neo-Pentecostal.
Yeah, neo-Pentecostal. That's what we call neo-Pentecostal. And so when we're talking around a broad spectrum.
Yes.
And so people are hearing different things.
Correct.
We're not just talking a monolithic language.
Yeah.
It's very it's very diverse.
We can't.
But I think though, when we look at the principle, I think in a nutshell, we know that the preacher, based on his work, is deserving
what he earns.
What he earns.
And he should be compensated.
And he should be compensated
fairly.
Fair. And Internal Revenue Service, make sure that happens legally. You can earn maybe 15 to 20% max, or else it'll be called an annulment. And so then you'll be money laundering and all of that. And so if you stay within the law, so if you can get 15, 20% legally of your income, the more income you raise, then
the more money you get.
The more, and so people can't say that that's unethical and so forth. But like any entrepreneur, you're only going to take the amount from your business that will keep your business open.
Correct.
So even though you may have 15, 20% ceiling, you may take 6% or 10% and then plow back into the ministry so that it can grow larger and larger. But I think that a lot of people just keeping up a lot of noise, but it's Satan, because we don't wrestle against flesh and blood.
No.
And so once again, it's another attack against the preacher. We talked about ecclesiastical bounty hunters the last time we were together.
They want to discredit what we do.
They want to discredit.
And then they want to put us in a box that they define as our value.
And you know what's interesting is, Paige, most of the people that talks about preachers' wealth is not even contributing to their wealth. You know, the people that are contributing to that person in their congregation or their partner base,
they have no problem.
They have no problems. No. And we don't get upset about nobody else's business and the money they make and their clientele except for church. Why are you so concerned about my members being taken advantage of? You mean to tell, and you're not concerned about where nobody else spends money?
You can buy liquor.
And nobody's saying nothing about that.
You can go to the cannabis dispensaries. I mean, you could do anything that looks even nefarious, and no one has anything to say about it. But when it comes to this religious space, everybody has a concern.
Yeah, it's because it's spiritual warfare.
Spiritual warfare.
I mean, when you get right down to it, because people say, they giving all that money to church. Well, you don't say nothing when you go on the cruise. You're giving all that money for a cabin. You go to Walmart. You go to a grocery store.
You go to Disney World.
Yeah.
Go on vacations.
And ain't nobody talking about how much of the money they
don't complain about how the prices of airline tickets have gone. If you want to go somewhere, you're going to pay the price.
It's all because it's value.
It's value.
They value what other people give. The people that talk about what we make and money and this, that, it's because they devalue us.
Correct.
They don't find value. And if you're not a part of my local community or extended community, my online community, then I don't expect you to find value in me. And I don't expect, if I were to ask you to sow a seed, I don't expect you to sow a seed because I'm not good harvest. I'm not good soil for you. Because nothing that comes out of my life blesses your life. But there are a whole bunch of other people, they understand my value and they understand, let he that is taught the word share all good things with him.
That's right.
That teaches the word. For God is not mocked.
That's right.
Whatsoever man sow,
you're gonna reap.
That shall he also reap.
Correct.
So, and I think that it's a shame sometimes, and now I really don't care anymore. It used to be a time when I was younger. Next year will be my 40th year. But it used to be a time when I was younger and successful in ministry. I wanted to hide everything I had. I would be afraid. I was uncomfortable driving my Mercedes into a grocery store. And I felt like people were looking at me saying, bless that man. He got that church over there taking all the people money.
Yeah.
Temperamentally, I didn't like social rejection. And so I didn't want people to see my stuff. So I wanted to hide it. I wanted to make sure they didn't know nothing about me. And so everything that I had except for my suits, I couldn't hide looking good. My suits I couldn't hide that. And so, but other than that, I was trying to hide. And then I had to really become comfortable in my own skin with my own legitimacy. I had to understand this was nothing wrong with me driving a car that I could drive. Now I drive a Bentley now. And I'm saying, I tell people, do you know how many Bentley dealerships there are all around the world? Do you know that people are buying Bentleys every day? Just because you can't afford it doesn't mean that there are not a market of people out there that can afford Bentleys. I said, now next year I'll be 65. So I said, I'm going to drive my Bentley right now because I only got a few more years before they take my license. So if I ain't driving what I want to drive by now, Paige, I'm saying I'm not hiding nothing no more, man. Listen, I done lived life. I work 7 days a week. And I mean that literally. And I don't care if people say, well, that's too much. Then I'm telling you what I do.
Well, listen.
You do what you do.
You asked me today, what'd you ask?
How many times a week do you preach on average? And you said 8 times a week. It's only 7 days. So every week, someplace you're preaching twice. You're preaching 2 times that day. And I not only preach and teach, but I'm the dean, the president, the founder
of a seminary,
of a seminary, an accredited seminary.
That's right.
In Bible college.
Yeah.
And then a host of other businesses, a restaurant, a publishing and printing, media and marketing, advertising.
You got your tentacles in a lot of different spots. So whatever you earn, whatever lifestyle you live, you deserve it and you've earned it.
Not to mention, I've written over 250 books.
250.
And they're not fluff books. They're not fluff books.
No.
They're not, don't have ghostwriters.
No.
And
no.
But I'm saying, and so for people to try to diminish my value
and devalue and put you in the class of those who have not worked as hard as you, it is disconcerting. But I'll say this. I think every pastor has value. It has significance.
That's right.
No matter what your financial
that's right.
situation may be.
That's right.
It's nothing wrong with being a bivocational pastor. If you have to work a corporate job to make ends meet, it's nothing wrong with that. It's admirable to not put the burden on your church for you to want to live a lifestyle here, but your church can't afford it. And you're taking everything that comes in order to maintain this image. I don't think that's wise. There's nothing wrong with living on the level where you are.
Nothing wrong.
But I think what happens today, I don't want to say that we're the cause of it, but I think that we have to be honest that ministry at one time was about Rolex watches, bracelets, rings, tailor-made suits, gator shoes.
We had it all.
And we had all of that.
Yep.
And for us, that was a status symbol.
Success.
That you had arrived
Yep.
with money and success. And those who saw it, that's what they wanted to aspire to, at the risk of taking elevators and not stairs to those levels. Because when you take the stairs and you work brick by brick to get there,
and you can sustain
then
it.
you can sustain it. But when you get there, taking the elevator
You don't-
or making other people look bad, thinking that you're going to get their spot, it doesn't last. It's not sustainable.
It's not
It doesn't go into perpetuity.
No. And and that's important. Paul says, I learned to live abound, and I've learned to live abase. But whatever state I'm in,
content.
I'm content. If you're working as hard as you can work and you're doing all that you know to do,
That's right.
and this is where you are, then you hold your head up.
Yes.
And
that's
you
right.
work harder. But I would say this, you don't have to settle for mediocrity.
No, you don't.
So go find somebody that's doing something you feel like God wants you to do, and latch your hold to them and let them see if they will pour into you and help you take your life and ministry to the next level. Like me, I've started recently a Kingdom Leadership Network.
Okay.
And I want to share with pastors and leaders the fruit of 40 years of ministry, starting in a house with 9 people to where we are now, to having one of the largest asset portfolios under African American leadership in the country. And I want to be able to help pour into pastors that need that kind of mentorship and pour. But the thing is, it's reciprocity. You only can reap into what you sow into. And so find somebody that you don't mind sowing into because they're good soil and they'll help you, because there are wealth principles and ministry principles that can help any ministry
That's right.
do better and be better. But you got to want better, not criticize better.
That's right. And do everything you can, no matter what level is on a level of excellence.
On a level of excellence.
Do everything with proficiency and excellence.
That's right.
And you'll attract excellence.
That's right. That's God like Daniel.
That's right.
Because he had an excellent spirit.
Correct.
Well, Stage, it's been a powerful time.
Powerful.
I want to encourage people to know that just because a pastor is prosperous doesn't mean that he's criminal.
That's right.
It is a part of God's principle. If you work hard, you can play hard.
That's
because
right.
he pays hard. And so if you don't work hard, then it doesn't pay hard. And that's in any profession you work in. And ministry is no difference. If you do well in ministry, God will bless you. If you are struggling in it, you need to get some help. And when you get the right help, that help will help you do better. Anything healthy will grow. And if it's not growing, that means it's something unhealthy. So find out what's unhealthy, get it healthy, and God will give you the growth. Well, thank you. This has been a blessing.
It has. I'm on my way to the Bentley dealership,
Yeah.
by the way. Okay, so only for the church.
Only for the church. Well, listen, I'm Dana,
I'm Liston.
and this has been
Only for the church.
If it had not been for the word that I heard, I'd be lost forever. But God saved me right there in the church.
Dr. Dana Carson's story begins where many pastors find themselves today, with nothing but a call and a vision. Years ago, Dr. Carson started with just 9 people in a house, no money, no theological education, no mentors willing to guide him because he had nothing to offer them. From struggling to find mentors to navigating the challenges of ministry with minimal resources, Dr. Carson faced what many pastors face every day. He knows the weight of building something from nothing, trusting God to open doors when others wouldn't. What if your story didn't have to stop there? Dr. Carson's 40 years of ministry proves he not only understands your journey, he has the tools to help you succeed. With advanced training in theology, entrepreneurship, and ministry, Dr. Carson equips pastors to build thriving ministries. His journey is proof that success is repeatable, no matter where you're starting from. He gained a global executive MBA to help ministry create streams of revenue that can better support vision. He started an online and on-campus theological kingdom training and seminary to help ministers learn the kingdom of God. He gained a master's in entrepreneurship to help those around him to free up their lives and resources for greater ministry and to revitalize the overlooked communities that surround many of our churches. Why does Dr. Carson do this? Because he has made a vow to God and to leaders like you. He knows what it's like to stand in your shoes, and he's committed to ensuring you don't have to walk alone. This is why the Kingdom Leadership Network exists, to empower pastors, equip churches, and advance the kingdom of God. Whether you're just starting out or leading a growing congregation, Dr. Carson has the heart, the tools, and the vision to help you fulfill your calling. Welcome to the Kingdom Leadership Network, a groundbreaking initiative led by the Kingdom Voice himself, Dr. Dana Carson. Dr. Carson's 21st century transformational organizational expertise impacts business professionals in addition to church leadership. An entrepreneur in his own right, he owns several additional businesses: Carson Consulting Group, IntelliChurch Ministry Solutions, FD's Famous Burgers and Chicago-style wings and soul food restaurant, and the Kingdom Publishing and Printing Company. The Kingdom Leadership Network isn't just a program, it's a movement designed to empower pastors and leaders to thrive in today's ever-changing ministry landscape. Collaboration is key to growth. Together, we sharpen one another and refine our callings. Dr. Dana Carson is a 21st century transformational leader with 40 years of ministry experience, a Harvard education, and a legacy of empowering pastors worldwide. Dr. Carson's vision for the Kingdom Leadership Network is clear: to build leaders who build the kingdom. Under his leadership, he birthed The Rock, a non-denominational church community building the kingdom around the world, beginning in Houston. Although God has established the Rock headquarters in Southeast Houston to impact and transform this community as a ministry, we have 6 different campuses for various ministry opportunities. Dr. Carson provides mentorship and exposure opportunities through at-risk programs for junior high and high school youth, and special mentor programs for young males of color, including the Carson Male Academy and the Young Prophets and Ministers. For his many efforts, President Barack Obama selected Dr. Carson to receive the President's Lifetime Achievement Award, the most prestigious given to a few Americans in recognition of over 4,000 hours of extraordinary service. In 2016, God gave Dr. Carson a significant assignment: the opportunity to acquire a Christian elementary school in Nairobi, Kenya, that educates almost 500 disadvantaged and unserved children in the Mukuru Kwanjenga slum. You don't have to do ministry alone. Together, we can build churches, empower communities, and transform nations for the glory of God. Join the Kingdom Leadership Network today, because no one builds the kingdom alone.